Hey guys, welcome to another HitFilm tutorial, where today we're looking at Mysterio's blasters from Spider-Man Far From Home. Little fun fact, in the comics, Mysterio is a master of visual and special effects, so that means one of us. Here we are in HitFilm with my composite shot already set up. The very first thing for this effect is to track the motion of my subject. So I'll open the drop down of my footage and click the plus icon next to Tracker. This activates the tracking window. In this footage, my hands move back and forth, so I'll be using the double points focusing on my finger and thumb for stability. Track your footage, and once happy, we'll create a point layer by pressing Ctrl, Alt and P, and then use F2 to rename this. Now with that made, I'll select the layer in my tracking window along with the values I'd like to transfer. As my hands push closer to the camera and therefore look bigger in size, I'm going to keep Scale, then hit Apply. For more on tracking, check out the card on screen now or link in the description. I have already imported a PNG image for my symbol. I'll drag this into the timeline and position it into a fitting placement over my hand and then parent it to one of the point layers. To fit with my camera angle, I turn this layer 3D, which will give an image a slight offset. I'll now use keyframes to animate its entry, focusing on the opacity of the layer just to have it fade in to its summoning. Going into rotation and using the Z axis, we'll set keyframes for the symbol to spin over the course of the shot. By then selecting the value and then heading into the value graph, we can adjust the animation speed, as I'm looking for something that will burst on impact then steady out. Don't forget to then activate that sweet motion blur to give the impression of a faster speed. When happy, duplicate this, slide it onto the other hand if you're using two hands, and parent to that layer. And then reverse the keyframes on this one, just to avoid it looking too in sync. Currently it looks like I have a fidget spinner, so let's change that. For the summoning, apply heat distortion to give it that evaporating effect, keyframing the distortion for maximum strength to subtle. This may vary depending on what sort of symbol you're using. This will then look like it's manifesting out of thin air. Then I threw a glow and a heavy diffuse for good measure. I'll now be turning off my footage for the remaining effects just for a better view. Make 2 points and set them to 3D. I'll switch my camera view to the top camera, and as I'll be using these as the ends of my beams, I'll place them either side of the camera's field of view and bringing them forward in Z-space. We're doing this method because it will just add the impression of going past the camera, and may be more appropriate for your shot if you're using motion tracking. Create a new layer, I'll be naming this one Beam 1, and under Particles and Simulation, grab Lightning and Electricity. Turn off the glow by bringing down the opacity to 0. Bring the wave to 0.2 to avoid things going crazy. And under Start, set it to one of the hand tracking points or symbols, and End to our new end points of frame. With our placement set, go into the end settings and find Growth. We'll animate this beam over a few frames to show it being fired out. Now is the time you can customize. Add more trunks to give it more of a base, and I'd advise removing the branches as these can look a bit distorted. Now I got stuck here. Our lightning effect is limited to a size of 5 points, but Javert had a crafty way around this. We'll first remove the background by using a demult, then invert the alpha map. Now we're going to choke it by using the matte cleaner. In doing this, we now have the ability to make it as large a size as we please. Increase the smoothness to remove the jagged edges. We'll duplicate the invert effect and place it at the bottom of our effects. Apply a fill color from the gradient and fill dropdown, and set it to the color of our beam. For some texture within the beam, let's apply a fractal noise from the Generate Effects tab. I'll be using the Solar preset for this tutorial. Then set the Fractal Noise's blend mode to add. Now to make this look more like energy, we're going to start off with a basic heat distortion. just to break up those neat lines. And so far, our beam isn't looking like it's got much movement going on. So under blurs, grab a zoom blur and apply it to our beam. This is going to provide a nice motion blur, giving the impression it's whooshing past the camera. A positive number directs the blur towards the camera, while a negative pushes the blur towards the center frame. Finally, I'm going to add a subtle diffuse and bring out more shadows and layers by applying curves. Now we have the beam's core, let's move on to the small debris, for which we'll be using a particle simulator from the particle and simulation dropdown. No need to create a layer as this effect generates its own. First, attach the emitter to a layer that you're tracking to, then by using the blue circle guide as a reference, adjust the scale and radius till the emitter is roughly as big as your magical symbol. Move into the particle system dropdown, and we'll start in the general settings first. If you're working on a burst like in my scene, then have the particles per second have a sudden increase before slowing down into a steady stream. Set the keyframe for the beginning of your particle system with a rise in particles on activation, then allow it to slow down over the course of the shot. Open the movement dropdown, and I'm going to adjust the particle scale and speed to be more subtle in my scene. Then in the dropdown below, I'll add some variety. By altering these values, we can create a less uniform particle system. Right now, these particles are just emitting and they're just going everywhere. We need to apply a force in order to direct them. Add a force by selecting the green plus symbol beside force. With our beam, we'll keep this type directional, increasing the strength level, and then by using the dials, I'll rotate the force in the same direction as my beam. Adjust these settings so you have something that's fitting with your Mysterio mist beam. Mysterio mist, that has a ring to it. To keep things simple, I'll use a tint to match it to the colour of my symbol, and then apply a glow and another zoom blur in order for it to be consistent with the design of the beam. Now with this effect set on one side, duplicate each of the layers and adjust the parent to the opposite hand if you're using both hands, or you're an octopus and have 8. With the effects set, all we need to do is the main compositing. You could go into each layer, but I would like to adjust the effect as a whole. To do this, I'll get my footage and make a new composite shot from it. Then I'll drag the old composite into this layer. Now I can go into the layer values and set the blend to the entire effect. For additional touches, I'm also going to add a glow for some intensity, adjusting the colour with a hue shift to look more like the one in the final film, followed by a gleam. The last thing to tie this all together with my footage is a small flicker on the subject's body. We have made something that emits some form of light, so we need to take that into consideration. To do this, go to the new layer icon and select New Grade Layer, calling this Flicker. With this selected, mask around your subject, go into the Fill and Gradient drop-down in the effects window and apply a fill color, matching it to the color of your illusion. Don't forget to then feather your mask, like I did. Under Grunge you will find Flicker. This is what we'll use to simplify the lighting animation. Adjust the frequency and amplitude to match the property of your beam's speed and power. Then, by going into the layer properties, we can set this to a subtle blending option, then dial down my opacity. Now you have a green flicker of light over your subject. As you may have guessed by looking at my footage, the camera motion I applied was fake. This was done by animating the scale of my footage and creating a grade layer with a shake from the grunge effects again. This helped build what could have been a rather flat shot. And that's it. Once done, send it all over for a good old grading. You are now the master of illusion. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications.